Whether you're looking for a Chevy car, truck, or SUV, go see my friends at Apple Chevy in Tinley Park. With over 500 new and used vehicles in stock, they have what you're looking for, and at the lowest price possible. Go to applechevy.com. All right, now, I'm not quite sure what to do with this.
What do you have over there?
Well, I have a piece of tape over here that's, it's disturbing me and the nation all at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
All right, what's going on in South Carolina? And I applaud, by the way, Nikki Haley, the governor of South Carolina, and Lindsey Graham, the Republican senator who's now announced he's going to run for president. And they all seem to now think that the flying of the Confederate flag over the state capitol in a fixed position.
Right. We were
where you
talking
can't
about that.
take it down. Mm-hmm. It was put up there so that it cannot be lowered by, the night janitor.
It's amazing because we were talking about this. We're saying even after 9/11, they didn't lower this flag because it's in this fixed position. Because all the, hullabaloo about after the shooting at the historic Black church, it didn't come down. They didn't lower it.
Right. Half staff.
It didn't go there.
You can't half staff it.
We can't half staff it, even though all the other flags outside all the significant buildings, government buildings there, did come down to half staff.
But it also sits there as it's a flag that has no official, as far as I'm concerned, as far as the United States is concerned. The state of through states' rights in South Carolina, it has some. It has some authority as a flag, which I don't understand. It would be like constant. I guess they fly the big Cubs flag up at Wrigley Field. I guess.
That's very symbolic, though.
Yes.
Years of losing and pain, excruciating.
Different situation.
Loyalty.
Bad analogy on my part, but the point is that you lost.
Yeah.
And this is it represented. I know that it's in the South. You'll often hear people say, and many historians will say, well, it wasn't just about slavery. No, it wasn't just about slavery. But the end result of the war was the end of slavery in the South. Mm-hmm. So even if you could make the argument it wasn't about that, it to me has always been it's been an amelioration for the generations of slave-owning families down there and people who happen to think that way of the world was a better way of the world.
Right.
To try to get them to just sort of come along. They've been vanquished by the North, but try to get them to come along. And there's no good reason to continue to play that game because there's nobody of good conscience that thinks that given the potential for offense of that flag. Mm-hmm. There's nobody of good conscience that thinks that it's a symbol that is worthwhile keeping around.
Well, I guess the relatives, the descendants of the Confederate veterans, they have this large group and a very loud group, and they are fighting all attempts to move the flag. But I don't know if they look at when people say, "Hey, it's a divisive symbol," and it's also used as a symbol of racism throughout their state, that those are problems.
I think there's a way to say to the families of the daughters of the Confederacy, I think there's a way to say to them that the Confederacy was a failed breakaway institution, right? It's what you sometimes have happen. You have a seceding, you've got a civil war. You see this all over the world now. We had this one great spasm here. But really, it is about the leaders of the South, and if you read anything about Robert E. Lee, this is really not for Robert E. Lee about injustice to people and slavery and all that. There was at the very end of this, the requiem at the end of this great American tragedy of the Civil War was a coming together. So why the United States flag doesn't suffice. in a situation like that? I will never know.
It's troubling. It's troubling.
Because we're all Americans.
And I'm not from those areas. I'm from Chicago. You are too. I can't put myself in the minds of the people who are descendants of Confederate veterans who say that this is totally separate from any shooting that happens at a church, that this is a tribute to them. And I don't know how you make that distinction, though, that you don't see this as also a symbol of hate.
Well, because it's on the tops of cars on their roofs. All right, so here's the president. So the president wades into this, and the one thing that I think is very interesting about this era of the Obama presidency is this: that he's last election, doesn't have to ever run for anything again.
Nope,
probably never will. He doesn't have to worry about getting a Congress elected. Didn't work out so well for him. So now
he's already kind of said, thrown up his hands on a lot of his agenda and says, I know I'm not going to get this passed, but I think it should. I know I'm not going to get to do this, and it was one of my goals, but I'm going to talk about it anyway. It seems like he's resigned to say, hey, a lot of my agenda didn't make it.
Didn't work out. So,
and I'm okay.
So guess what? Here's what we're going to do. I'm going to tell you exactly what I think from this point forward. So he goes on Mark Maron's podcast. Mark Maron has a very, very popular podcast, but
even more popular now.
Well, people will be tuning in to see what this is, but then they'll go back to and whatever goes on Mark Maron's podcast, which is taking place in his garage. You see the pictures of him? It's like showing up in like a teenager's room or something. There's like stuff all over the walls. It's like there's a fat head there. I don't know. It's
Star
weird.
Wars stuff. And there's not for a guy who's very successful, and I'm assuming making a lot of money off this podcast, because you can if you have the kind of followers he does. You would think that he'd have a nicer office, but it's not. It looks like a little IKEA desk with a couple little retractable lights
and microphones. And I had a setup like that in my room when I was 15.
I bet you did.
All right, so now here's what the president said about the entire issue here concerning South Carolina.
First of all, I always tell young people in particular, do not say that nothing's changed when it comes to race in America unless you lived through being a black man in the 1950s or 60s or 70s. It is incontrovertible that race relations have improved significantly during my lifetime and yours.
Okay. Excellent point. Well, and I think that is absolutely... That's true. And actually, this whole thing, he makes a ton of sense, including dropping the N-word. But he goes on.
What is also true is that the legacy of slavery, Jim Crow, discrimination in almost every institution of our lives, that casts a long shadow. And that's still part of our DNA. That's passed on.
I really like that the president is venturing into this territory and actually talking about race in America, and he's been doing it a lot lately. Some might say too much, but it's our first black president making statements about the issues of racism in America, and I think it's a powerful thing. He makes a lot of sense.
Starts the conversation. I don't know that this conversation's been started a number of times.
Sure.
I don't know that it eventually does result. But you see every generation making not as big a turn as you think they're going to make.
Right.
In our generation, my generation, there was, we were younger. It was the beginning of the Martin Luther King holiday movement. There was, a lot of, in where I went to school, there was a number of units about racism and injustice and the African American experience and all that. The Black Studies movement through the 60s, 70s, 80s, and today. That has all been that's. Every time, and you think, well, that's going to fix it. Well, it doesn't. But it does move, I think, to the president's point, it does move the dial slightly, right? But then his POTUSness says this.
Racism, we are not cured of. And it's not just a matter of it not being polite to say in public. That's not the measure of whether racism still exists or not. It's not just a matter of overt discrimination. Societies don't overnight completely erase everything that happened 200 to 300 years prior.
It's funny because when the word comes out of his mouth, and we made an editorial decision there to play the edited version, there, the beeped version.
There's even national news shows are playing the unbeeped version.
Right. I considered playing the unbeeped version, but I don't think I get to make that choice around here. Because I think it's appropriate to play the unbeeped version because it's the President of the United States making news saying that. It's not like,
Right.
it's not like he went on some like...
or being used.
Right. And he intended to say it. It was very intentional.
Very. You could see he stopped. He almost stopped saying it, and then he said it. And it's a powerful thing to hear coming from his lips. Just because you aren't using that word does not mean that racism doesn't exist.
But as soon as the word pops out, and this is true for black people and white people, like all of the thought ceases. There's like an embarrassment for white people when they hear it, and a fear. There's an anger element for African Americans when they hear it, and so the point gets lost in it. And we wouldn't be talking about this. He went on this podcast and he'd said the N word as opposed to saying the word. No one would, be like, okay, he went on what? Did he go where? Where was he? Why was he doing a podcast?
WTF podcast? No, it's got a good following. And he's been going to these mainstream news organizations. He went to YouTube and was interviewed by that girl with the green lips and everything. And, he's done those rounds.
The one that was on Dancing with the Stars, right?
Yes,
was it her?
Right.
Yeah.
And she asked him about her lipstick and lots of substantive issues too, but also, they asked those questions about what kind of underwear you wore.
Well, he likes to fill out his brackets on ESPN every year. And I'm like, hey, dude, the world is on fire over here. He's still got a lot to do. I mean, it's not like he doesn't have anything left to do politically, but he does have a lot to do internationally and there's economic issues here as well. But to wade into this right now and to drop that and to say it, it starts the conversation up. Now, what will invariably happen is the peddlers of race on both sides, the people who make money or create influence or power off of dividing, are all going to jump to this. And they're all going to jump on it and go, wow, the president said it, we can all say it. Or look at the president saying this, and he's just doing this for political reasons or whatever it is. I looked at this, and I've been pretty critical of him over the last 8 years, 7 years. How long has he been in office? I think he spoke from the heart. I think he was completely honest in what he was doing there. He said exactly the right thing. A lot has changed. Some still has not. And just because we have chosen to take that word out of polite vernacular is what he is saying, doesn't mean that that the attitudes behind it and the anger behind it and the misunderstandings about it and the misunderstandings within the black community about it and some of the craziness that that happens on the streets, on the urban streets of America. It's all part of the same big bouillabaisse that needs to be strained and divided to create. We definitely need to take some of the bad stuff out of there.
It's the overt racism versus the covert or the more subtle institution of racism in America. And I think that it's really, you can applaud the president for going there, using that word and starting this whole conversation. He's been talking about it, sure, with all the different police shootings across America, and it's been reaching a bubbling point, I think, in America, race relations. There's a new point here, a new kind of tipping point. And he's going out there to keep that conversation going.
Here's the over-under. 6 o'clock tonight, before the first video hits YouTube of a recut gangster rap video where that word is prominently used, and they drop him saying it into the video.
That's coming.
Yes.
That's coming.
I had to stop the Rowan Roper. Who are they? The Rokon Show Mighty Heart players from doing exactly that. Hold on a second.
Don't do it yet.
No,
we're bleeping it.
I got an idea. We have a whole room of people back there going, all right, here's what we do with this.